Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Spill Prevention, Control, and Countermeasure. Oh my. My name is Helen Miller with the Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance here at Ohio EPA, and I will be moderating this afternoon's presentation. From US EPA, we have Kim Churchill with Region 5 SPCC Coordinator and Heather McNerney, Region 5 SPCC Inspector. With that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Kim.
Thanks, Helen. This is Kim, and I've got Heather with me virtually, and we're going to go over the SPCC Spill Prevention, Control, and Countermeasure regulation with you today. Now, before we start, though, I do want to give in this obligatory legal disclaimer that anything that Heather and I say can't and shouldn't be used against us if we mistakenly say something that goes against any of the rules, regulations, statutes, or guidance during this presentation. So in the event we have anything in this presentation or say anything that conflicts, what we say and in this presentation is not controlling, but we're going to do our best to make sure we don't say anything that is incorrect. Now, I do want to apologize in advance because we have a lot of information that we're going to try to cram into this session. We're going to start with an introduction to the rule and who the rule applies to. We'll get into subpart A, which is the general requirements for all facilities required to have an SPCC plan. Then we'll briefly touch on subparts B and C, which are additional requirements based on a facility type or oil type that's at the facility. And then we'll wrap it up with regional contacts and guidance that we have available. I want to note that we're not going to be able to cover every provision, and the ones that we do cover may not be covered in full. Several of the provisions for SPCC are performance-based, so we're not going to be able to give you like a one-size-fits-all approach, but we're going to do the best we can in the limited time that we have. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather, and she's going to cover where the regulation comes from and who needs to follow it.
Alrighty, thank you, Kim. So EPA has two major oil regulations found under Title 40 for protection of the environment. First is Part 112, and that covers oil pollution prevention, which addresses requirements to prevent oil discharges from reaching navigable waters or adjoining shorelines through the use of containment, control, and countermeasures, hence where the name SPCC comes from. We also have Part 110, which prohibits the discharge of oil. This is also called the Sheen Rule, and it's what establishes reporting requirements for discharges along with harmful quantities. Both of these parts are promulgated under the authority of the Clean Water Act. Okay, so I'm sure some of you are here wondering, is my facility subject to the SPCC rule? In order for the SPCC rule to apply to a facility, there are four main criteria that need to be met, involving facility type, the activities involving oil, the reasonable expectation of a discharge, and threshold capacities. There is an additional criterion to consider as well, known as substantial harm, which I'll touch on a little later. But first, let's look at these main criteria more closely. Now, for our purposes, facility type can be divided into three categories. These are transportation related, non-transportation related, or complexes. So let's go over the difference between these types of facilities. Non-transportation related facilities are those at which EPA has jurisdiction, and these are going to include fixed or mobile onshore and offshore drilling and production facilities, oil refining and storage facilities, facilities that use and store oil, waste oil treatment facilities, equipment used to transfer oil in bulk to or from highway vehicles or rail cars, and highway vehicles, rail cars, and pipelines used to transport oil within the confines of a non-transportation related facility. Next, for transportation related facilities, those are facilities at which DOT or the U.S. Coast Guard has jurisdiction. And these include those facilities with equipment used to transfer oil in bulk to or from a vessel, on and offshore oil pipelines, highway vehicles and rail cars used for the transportation of oil, and the fueling of locomotives. It's quite possible that a facility will have both transportation and non-transportation related activities, and if that's the case, the facility is then considered a complex. And complexes are subject to the jurisdiction of more than one federal agency under Section 11 of the Clean Water Act. Okay, so the next piece for applicability that we look at is the oil activity. If the facility engages in drilling, producing, gathering, storing, processing, refining, transferring, distributing, using, or consuming oil or oil products, then SPCC may apply. Keep in mind that the regulation does include a definition for oil, meaning oil in any kind or in any form, including but not limited to petroleum, sludge, synthetic oils, mineral oils, oil refuse, and oil mixed with wastes, as well as animal fats and vegetable oils. The next criterion to look at is if the facility can reasonably be expected to discharge oil in quantities that may be harmful into or upon navigable waters of the U.S. Section 112.2 of the regs does include a definition for discharge, which includes any spilling, leaking, pumping, pouring, emitting, emptying, or dumping of any amount of oil, no matter where it occurs. Discharge is also described under 112.1b, and this section refers to quantities that may be harmful, as mentioned in the Sheen Rule Part 110 that we went over earlier, which includes any discharge that violates applicable water quality standards, causes a sheen or film on the surface, or causes a sludge or emulsion to be deposited beneath the surface. And as part of this reasonable expectation determination, keep in mind that harmful applies to public health or welfare and the environment. When determining reasonable expectation, you also want to make sure you keep in mind that this is based solely on the geographical and locational aspects of a facility. In such case, man-made features such as secondary containment structures and even buildings themselves cannot be included in this determination. However, when you are making this determination, you can include factors such as whether a past discharge reached a navigable water, whether the facility is near navigable waters and any intervening natural drainage, if there are any on-site conduits that could act as a pathway to a navigable water, any unique geological or geographical features such as depth of groundwater or sloping, if precipitation runoff could transport oil, and also the quantity and nature of oil stored at the facility. All right, so finally, the last criterion is for total oil storage capacity. And if your facility meets all of the previous criteria that I discussed and has over 1,320 gallons of above ground oil storage, or greater than 42,000 gallons of completely buried oil storage, then you are subject to the SPCC rule. Now, on calculating the total oil storage capacity, you must count all oil storage containers with an individual capacity of 55 gallons or greater. This includes oil-filled equipment. When determining the storage capacity of each container, storage capacity refers to the shell capacity, the design capacity, not the amount of oil stored based on the facility's operations. So, for example, if you have a 5,000 gallon above ground storage tank at a facility that is only ever filled halfway to 2,500 gallons, you still need to count the 5,000 gallon shell capacity, design capacity as the amount you're using towards your total oil storage capacity at the facility. If there are new containers at the facility that are empty and have never stored oil, then those are exempt from the total capacity until they are brought into service. And then permanently closed containers are also exempt from the total oil storage capacity. A container is considered permanently closed under the rule when all liquid and sludge has been removed, you've disconnected and blanked off all lines and piping, closed and locked all valves, and posted signs indicating that the container has been permanently closed and include the date of the closure. And I just want to note here that the sign needs to explicitly state permanently closed, not out of service. Additional exempted containers include hot mix asphalt containers, residential heating oil containers, milk containers, completely buried tanks subject to UST requirements at both 40 CFR Part 280 or a state-approved program under 40 CFR Part 281, and containers used exclusively for wastewater treatment. So remember here, any container that is not exempt and is 55 gallons or greater must be counted towards the total oil storage capacity at the facility. So the last thing we want to touch on for applicability is related to substantial harm. Under the rule, a facility may also be subject to FRP requirements if they have a total oil storage capacity of 42,000 gallons or greater and they transfer oil over water to or from a vessel, or they have 1 million gallons or greater of total oil storage capacity and then meet one or more of the following conditions. They lack sufficient secondary containment. They're located at such a distance where a discharge could cause an injury to fish, wildlife, and sensitive environments. Located at a distance where a discharge could shut down a public drinking water intake. Or within the last 5 years, they have had a reportable discharge of 10,000 gallons or greater. So if a facility meets the substantial harm criteria, they are then required to prepare and submit a facility response plan to EPA for approval. And this would be in addition to preparing and implementing an SPCC plan. For those facilities that don't meet this criterion, they are still required to complete and maintain the certification form though. And that brings us to our first live polling question, everyone. So starting off right off the bat. Okay. When determining SPCC applicability, which factors should not be considered when determining the reasonable expectation of an oil discharge from a facility in harmful quantities? Would it be precipitation runoff, sewer systems, secondary containment or other man-made structure, overland flow path, or whether a past discharge of oil reached a navigable water? So which of these would not be considered when determining reasonable expectation of an oil discharge in harmful quantities? All right, looks like most of you guys were paying attention. So remember, secondary containment or other man-made structures cannot be considered when determining reasonable expectation of an oil discharge in harmful quantities. All right, so I am going to hand it back over to Kim to keep things moving along with subpart A of the rule, SPCC requirements for all facilities.
Thanks, Heather. Okay, so subpart A is any facility that's subject to the rule is going to have to follow the requirements in subpart A. And these include that you must prepare a plan in writing, and it has to be in accordance with 112.7 and any other applicable sections of the rule. There are compliance dates associated with preparing, amending, and implementing a plan. Now, for any new facility that is a non-production facility, you have to prepare and implement a plan before beginning operations. But new production facilities are able to prepare and implement a plan within 6 months after beginning operations. Any facility that is currently in existence and operating should have already had a plan in place because we are well past the compliance date requirements for existing facilities. Now, except as provided in 112.6 for qualified facilities, a licensed professional engineer must review and certify a plan. Now, it's important to remember, though, that a PE certification does not relieve the owner or operator of their duty to prepare and implement the plan. We do get a lot of questions about PE certification, and I want to cover two of those that we get. First, for federal compliance, a professional engineer does not need to be licensed in the same state that the facility is located. However, some state licensing boards may not allow it, so make sure you have a PE aware of what the state licensing boards allow in their state. And then second, the PE can be an employee of the facility. The PE does not have to be a third party. Employees of the facility can be the professional engineer that reviews and certifies the plan. You do need to maintain a complete copy of the plan at the facility if it's normally attended at least 4 hours a day. If not, you have to have it at the nearest field office, and you have to have the plan available for EPA to review during normal working hours. Now, the regulation does not require that plans be submitted to EPA for review or approval like the FRPs do, but again, they have to be made available during normal business hours when they're requested, or some additional provisions may require submittal to EPA, like if you've had a discharge. which, speaking of discharges, you have to report to the EPA regional administrator whenever you have a discharge of more than 1,000 gallons of oil in a single discharge to navigable waters or adjoining shorelines, or more than 42 gallons of oil in each of 2 discharges within a 12-month period. If you have either of these, or unfortunately both, you would need to report to EPA within 60 days. Now, it's important to note, though, when you're making the determination for quantity discharge, it's the amount that reaches the water or the adjoining shoreline. So if you had 1,000 gallons that discharge from a container, but only 900 gallons reach the water or adjoining shorelines, then the discharge does not need to be reported under 112.4. However, any oil discharge that violates 40 CFR Part 110, the Sheen rule, that does require notification to the National Response Center. Now, if you have a change at your facility that could affect the potential for discharge, such as commissioning or decommissioning containers, replacing, reconstructing, or moving containers or piping, any kind of construction or demolition that could alter secondary containment structures, if you have a change in product or service, if you revise operating or maintenance procedures, you must amend the plan. Now, amendments must be prepared within 6 months of the change and implemented as soon as possible, but no later than 6 months following the preparation of the amendment. Any technical amendments require a licensed PE review and certify the technical amendment. However, any amendment that is administrative in nature, such as updating contact numbers or the facility diagram, they don't require PE certification. Now, as a general rule of thumb, if the amendment requires the application of good engineering practice, it will require professional engineer certification. And if you're not sure whether a change is technical or non-technical, you should have it certified. The regulation requires that you complete a full review and evaluation of your plan at least once every 5 years. And if more effective prevention and control technology is available that will significantly reduce the likelihood of a discharge, you must amend your plan within 6 months to include the new technology and implement the amendments no later than 6 months following the preparation of the amendment. And these would be a technical change, so you would need PE certification of that amendment. You do need to document the completion of the full review and evaluation that you do at least once every 5 years, and you have to sign a statement as to whether you will or will not amend the plan as a result of that review and evaluation. Now, smaller oil storage facilities may be eligible for streamlined requirements under 112.6 if they meet eligibility requirements. If the facility has 10,000 gallons or less of total above ground storage tank capacity, and they have no single discharge exceeding 1,000 gallons, or no 2 discharges exceeding 42 gallons in any 12-month period in the last 3 years, then they can qualify as a Tier 2 facility and may choose to self-certify a full SPCC plan. However, if a facility chooses to deviate from allowed measures, including environmentally equivalent measures, which I'll go into in a little bit, a PE must certify those alternative measures. Now, if a facility meets the same criteria as a Tier 2 facility, but they also have no individual above ground storage tank greater than 5,000 gallons, they may qualify as a Tier 1 facility with streamlined requirements for integrity testing and security, and they have the option to complete and implement a self-certified SPCC plan template that's been prepared by EPA. Now, the template's been prepared. We're not actually preparing the whole plan for you. You would fill out the template in lieu of a full SPCC plan. Now, it's important to note that the use of the template is optional for Tier 1 facilities, and Tier 2 facilities cannot use the template. The template's for Tier 1 facilities. Now, all plans for all facilities, even qualified facilities that self-certify, they all have to be prepared in accordance with good engineering practices. They have to have the full approval of management at a level of authority to commit resources necessary to implement the plan. And the plan needs to follow the sequence of the rule. If it doesn't, it must be an equivalent plan that meets all applicable requirements, and it has to have a cross-section referencing the locations of the requirements. This is a big one. Now, if additional facilities or procedures, methods, or equipment are not yet fully operational at the time of the plan being prepared, you have to explain the details of installation and startup. Now, just a moment ago, I mentioned environmental equivalence. There's an environmental equivalence provision contained in 112.7A2 that allows for deviations from specific requirements of the rule as long as an alternative measure provides equivalent environmental protection. Now, this is a key mechanism for performance-based portions of the SPCC rule, and the flexibility enables owners and operators to achieve environmental protection in a manner that fits the facility's unique circumstance. Eligible provisions include, but are not limited to, security, brittle fracture evaluation, facility drainage, integrity testing, overfill protection, monitoring effluent treatment facilities, and piping. However, you cannot deviate from any of the secondary containment requirements. And more on secondary containment requirements will come, but again, for environmental equivalent protection, secondary containment never applies. Now, in your plan, you have to describe the physical layout of the facility and include a facility diagram. You do have to mark the location and contents of each fixed oil storage container and the storage area where mobile or portable containers are located. If you have any exempt tanks or pipelines, you still have to identify them, but mark them as exempt on the diagram. The plan needs to include the type of oil in each container and its storage capacity. And then routine handling of oil products must be described along with discharge prevention measures and your discharge and drainage controls. In addition to describing how you're going to prevent and control a discharge, you have to address the countermeasures for discharge discovery, response, and cleanup. You need to address how you're going to dispose of recovered materials and make sure you're taking into account state disposal laws. Including your plan contact information for the facility response coordinator, the National Response Center, cleanup contractors that you have an agreement for response, and all appropriate federal, state, and local agencies that would need to be contacted in case of a discharge. If you are not an FRP facility, you have to provide information for reporting a discharge, and you need to organize the portions of your plan that describes procedures for responding to a discharge so they're readily available during an emergency. Remember, you don't want to be fumbling through various pages or sections of the plan to get the information you need during a discharge. Now, a major portion of the plan is the prediction of the direction, rate of flow, and total quantity of oil which could be discharged as a result of each type of major equipment failure. So you need to include predictions for things like tank loading or unloading, tank overflow, rupture or leakage, and any other equipment known to be the source of a discharge. You want to be able to know and include in your plan where the discharge is going to go, how fast it's going to be going, and how much is going to go if there's a failure. Now, for all areas and equipment with the potential for discharge, you need to provide appropriate containment or diversionary structures to prevent a discharge. The entire containment system has to be capable of containing oil, and it has to be constructed so that any discharge will not escape containment before cleanup occurs. Under 112.7C, this is the general secondary containment requirement, and it's intended to address the most likely oil discharge from any part of a facility with no sizing or freeboard requirements, and it's the minimum expectation for containment. Now, specific or size secondary containment in relation to loading and unloading racks and bulk storage containers are going to be covered later. Now, general secondary containment can be passive or active. Passive measures are permanent installations that do not require deployment or action, like dikes and berms, culverting, curbing, retention ponds, sumps, strip pans. Active containment are measures that require deployment or other specific action either before the handling of oil starts or in reaction to a discharge. So things like putting out a drain cover, having a spill kit, closing valves, those would be active containment measures. Now, it's important to note that active secondary containment measures are not the same as a contingency plan. Active measures are things that are put in place before the oil activity starts or in reaction to a discharge before it reaches water or leaves facility property. Whereas a contingency plan is a detailed oil spill response plan on how to address a discharge that has reached navigable water and has left the facility. Now, in some cases, it may be impracticable to provide secondary containment by any reasonable method. In these cases, the owner-operator may substitute a combination of other measures in place of secondary containment. So this is an impracticability provision, not environmental equivalence. Considerations for impracticability include space limitations, local ordinances or fire code, safety, or other good engineering practices. Economic cost can be considered, but it cannot be the only factor. If an impracticability determination is made, it has to be clearly explained in the plan and certified by the professional engineer. The owner-operator would need to prepare an oil spill contingency plan in accordance with 40 CFR Part 109 and provide a written commitment of manpower to control and remove the oil discharge unless that facility has submitted an FRP. And then there's also additional requirements for integrity testing and leak testing if bulk storage containers are involved in this impracticability determination. There are also requirements for record keeping. You have to have written procedures for tests and inspections, and you must keep those records for a period of 3 years. They have to be signed by the appropriate supervisor or inspector. The facility has to train all oil handling personnel in operation and maintenance to prevent discharge, discharge procedure protocols, applicable pollution control laws, and of course, the contents of the SPCC plan. You have to have a person that is accountable for discharge prevention and schedule and conduct a discharge prevention briefing at least once a year. The plan also will need to address how you control access to your oil areas, how you would secure master flow and drain valves, prevent unauthorized access to oil pumps, and you also need to address the appropriateness of security lighting. So think, how are you going to prevent acts of vandalism and what's being done or is in place to assist in the discovery of a discharge? And with that, we're going to get to our next polling question to see how well I'm presenting and how well you are listening. How often must a facility complete a full review and evaluation of the SPCC plan? Do you need to complete the full review every 6 months, annually, every 3 years, every 5 years, or only when there is a change at the facility? I've said all of these things so far in this presentation, but only one of these answers is for when you must complete a full review and evaluation. All right, I'm happy to see that the majority of you got it right. It is 5 years. Full review and evaluation at least once every 5 years. That's great. All right, hopefully you guys are all still with me because I'm not quite through all of subpart A yet. If you have a loading or unloading rack at your facility, 112.7H is going to apply to you. Now, we get asked a lot what a loading unloading rack is. Under the SPCC rule, we have a definition where it's a fixed structure necessary for the loading or unloading of a tank truck or tank car. Now, we often get asked, what is the difference between that and a transfer area? And this is quite an important difference because transfer areas only require general secondary containment, whereas a loading unloading rack is going to, as I'm going to tell you in a bit, require size secondary containment. So what we want you to look for is a loading arm. Look for that loading unloading arm, and if you have it, you have a rack. If you don't, you have a transfer area. So for loading unloading racks, If drainage doesn't flow into a catchment basin or a treatment facility designed to handle discharges, you have to use a quick drainage system, or you also must design any containment system to hold at least the maximum capacity of any single compartment of tank car or tank truck loaded or unloaded at the facility. So no freeboard requirement. You'll also need to make sure that your tank truck doesn't accidentally depart before disconnecting by providing interlocked warning lights or physical barrier systems, warning signs, wheel chocks, or a vehicle brake interlock system. And don't forget to inspect the lowermost drain and all outlets before filling and departure. If you have field constructed above ground containers, you need to evaluate the container for risk of discharge or failure due to brittle fracture. Ohio is going to want you to pay attention to this requirement. You have to discuss conformance with any applicable more stringent state rules, regulations, and guidelines. Now, if you have oil-filled operational equipment, there is an option to provide alternative measures in lieu of general secondary containment if you meet qualification criteria, which are no single discharge of oil greater than 1,000 gallons, no two discharges greater than 42 gallons in any 12-month period. If you choose, you can have the alternative measures where you would need to establish and document an inspection or monitoring program and prepare an oil spill contingency plan and have a written commitment of manpower, unless, of course, you're an FRP facility. Now, keep in mind that for qualified oil-filled operational equipment, there's no impracticability determination made if you want to use alternative measures in lieu of secondary containment. But this is also optional. You can choose to provide general secondary containment. And with that, I am going to give my lungs a break, and I'm going to hand it over to Heather, who's going to talk about portions of subpart B and C of the regulation.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. So the SPCC rule contains additional regulations for facilities based on the activities they engage in and the type of oil they handle. Subpart B addresses facilities that handle petroleum and non-petroleum oils. And subpart C, which includes 112.12, addresses facilities that handle animal fat and vegetable oils. Subparts B and C do have many similar requirements with specifics related to the facility, activity, or oil type. Sorry, Kim, can you go back a slide? Yeah. They do have similar requirements related to the facility, activity, or oil type. Each of these parts includes provisions for facility drainage, such as diked and undiked areas and drainage systems. They also include requirements for bulk storage containers, such as size secondary containment, containment drainage, requirements for buried tanks, integrity testing, liquid level sensing, effluent treatment, overfill protection, and process vessels, just to name a few. Requirements for facility transfer operations are covered under these provisions as well, including pumping and facility processes related to buried piping, pipe supports, inspections, and flow lines. Keep in mind that with our limited time left, we're only going to highlight some key provisions under 112.8, 112.9, and 112.12 related to bulk storage containers. So under 112.2 of the rule, the definition of a bulk storage container is any container used to store oil. And these containers may be used for things like the storage of oil prior to use, while oil is being used, or prior to further distribution in commerce. It's important to note that under the definition, oil-filled electrical, oil-filled operational, and oil-filled manufacturing equipment are not considered bulk storage containers. So requirements specific to bulk storage containers would not apply to these. So if you do have bulk storage containers at your facility, such as the larger field constructed or smaller shop-built above ground storage containers, any partially buried, bunkered, or vaulted tanks, or any other above ground storage containers like drums or totes, then the regulation requires integrity testing of these containers, and this is a really key part of the rule. Facilities with bulk storage containers are required to test or inspect each container for integrity on a regular schedule or when material repairs are made. And the rule provides some flexibility for the owner-operator to use industry standards to develop their integrity testing program. the facility owner operator is able to determine, in accordance with industry standards, the appropriate qualifications for those performing tests and inspections at the facility, and the frequency and type of testing and inspections that take into account the container size, configuration, and design. So examples of industry standards commonly used are API 663 for field constructed containers and STISP 001 for shop built containers. Under 112.12 of the rule, there are certain animal fat and vegetable oil containers that are not subject to integrity testing requirements. If the animal fat and vegetable oil bulk storage container is subject to 21 CFR Part 110, is also elevated, constructed of austenitic stainless steel, has no external insulation, and is shop fabricated, then only formal visual inspections on a regular schedule are required. However, if this is the case, you must still frequently observe the outside of the container for signs of deterioration or discharge and for any accumulation of oil inside diked areas. You would also still be required to determine and document in the plan the appropriate qualifications for those individuals performing the visual inspections. So Kim touched a little on secondary containment, and we cover it even further in subparts B and C. Bulk storage containers require size secondary containment, and even the animal fat and vegetable oil containers that are not subject to integrity testing would be subject to size secondary containment. Size secondary containment is different from general secondary containment, and it requires that the containment be sized for the entire capacity of the largest single container within the containment structure and account for sufficient freeboard to contain precipitation. The SPCC rule does not specifically define the term sufficient freeboard, nor does it describe how to calculate this volume, but 110% of the storage tank capacity as a rule of thumb may be acceptable. And if data is available that the owner operator can consider, you could also use the 25-year, 24-hour storm event for design criteria. Some states may even require storm events when designing the secondary containment. So in some cases, this could relate to a more stringent sizing criteria than the 110% rule of thumb. You may also want to consider the frequency of dike drainage and inspections when factoring in sufficient freeboard, because accumulated precipitation is going to take away from the available containment capacity within the containment structure. Also important to note that under the rule, any diked areas must be sufficiently impervious to contain discharged oil. And if the secondary containment area contains additional tanks, piping, support structures, then calculations for the size secondary containment volumes must take into account displacement from these other items sharing space within the containment structure. Facilities may also choose to use an alternative system consisting of a drainage trench enclosure to meet the size secondary containment requirement, provided that this enclosure is arranged so that any discharge will be safely confined in a facility catchment basin or holding pond. Specifically for production facilities, the size secondary containment requirements apply to bulk storage containers at the tank battery, separation and treatment facilities, which includes stock tanks, produced water containers, and separation equipment like heater treaters. Note that for these last two, though, the rule includes alternative measures for certain production equipment in lieu of size secondary containment. And I know we just went through subparts B and C really quick, but we're going to get moving on to polling question number 3. So which of the following requires general secondary containment and not sized or specific secondary containment? Would it be loading, unloading racks, transfer areas, bulk storage containers, mobile or portable storage containers, or stock oil tanks at an oil production battery? So this is going to involve stuff that both Kim and I spoke to, which would require general secondary containment and not sized or specific secondary containment. All right, great. Looks like the majority of you got this correct. So which would require general secondary containment and not sized or specific secondary containment? That would be transfer areas. So good job, guys. Now to close things out and cover where you can find some more information, I am going to hand it back over to Kim.
Thanks, Heather. All right, don't fret if you're feeling overwhelmed. I know that was a lot to take in such a short amount of time. I, again, am the Region 5 SPCC coordinator. I'm located in the Ann Arbor office, so I'm in Eastern time with you guys in Ohio. Heather is located in Chicago, so she's an hour behind us. So if you've got a call at 5 o'clock, you might have a better chance of reaching Heather. And then we also have Alex Tizales. He is our FRP coordinator in Chicago. He will be the one you want to direct any questions on FRP to. Now, our website has great fact sheets and guidance documents to assist you guys with understanding and implementing the rule. You can go to www.epa.gov/oil spill to find a lot of great information. I believe we include a lot of links to the fact sheets and this guidance document I'm going to talk about on the handout provisions for this session. Now, with the little time we have left, I want to highlight EPA's SPCC guidance for regional inspectors. It's designed to assist in implementing rule requirements, understand applicability, and clarify EPA's role when reviewing a facility's implementation of the performance-based provisions of the rule. Now, the document is divided into chapters and includes several appendices. Chapter 1 gives you the purpose and scope of the regulation and its history. Chapter 2 provides an in-depth discussion on applicability criteria and relevant scenarios. So if you want to know whether or not something's an oil, check out this chapter. Chapter 3 covers environmental equivalence provisions and the requirements that are eligible. Chapter 4 of the document is going to cover secondary containment, both general and sized, and it describes the requirements and demonstrates how they apply to specific equipment and activities, and it also gets into impracticability determinations. If you have an oil water separator, you'll want to pay close attention to Chapter 5 to see how the rule applies to various scenarios involving those. Chapter 6 is going to cover the necessary level of detail for your facility description and the facility diagram. And Chapter 7 provides an overview of inspection, evaluation, and testing requirements. In addition to the chapters, we've got several appendices with lots of great information. You'll find copies of the regulation in Appendix A and B. Appendix C is going to include the revisions to the rule because there's been several amendments over the years. And now there's a reason why this guidance document is over 900 pages. That's because we include a sample SPCC plan for a bulk storage facility and a production facility. So if you are starting from scratch and you have no idea what a plan might look like, you can reference these sample plans in Appendix D and E. And then I believe I saw someone ask about a sample or template for a contingency plan. We actually have a sample contingency plan in this guidance document as well in Appendix F. You'll notice that I have made Appendix G highlighted in larger text. This is because I personally think it's the most important document that a facility can use to help determine whether or not they're addressing all applicable requirements in their plan and implementing them. It's the checklist that EPA uses when conducting an inspection. I highly, highly recommend you review your plan and implementation against the checklist to ensure that you're following all applicable provisions. And then finally, Appendix H includes numerous policy documents, such as EPA memos on the use of alternative secondary containment measures, the EPA liner study, the infamous Safety-Kleen letter that addresses scenarios for when a railroad goes from transportation-related to non-transportation-related, EPA jurisdiction at complexes, FRP rule attachments, and worksheets for calculating secondary containment volumes. Now, one last piece of advice, because this document is quite large, it's PDF, control find and keyword searches. That is going to be your key in finding what you're looking for in this document, because there's certain sections that cover a topic more than once. So control find and your keyword search, highly recommend that. And with that, we're going to close out with one last polling question for you guys to see how good of a job I did on emphasizing this portion of the regulation, environmental equivalence. Now, what here are you not allowed to use the environmental equivalence, the 112.782 deviation for? Is it integrity testing, dike drainage, equipped with open and closed design, mobile portable containers with secondary containment, overfill prevention measures, or all of the above? What can you not use environmental equivalence on? And just think, would I throw in a trick question or not? Oh, guys, I did trick you. Environmental equivalence is applicable to integrity testing, dike drainage, and overfill prevention measures. It's just not for the mobile portable container secondary containment. Secondary containment is not allowed for environmental equivalence. That would be an impracticability determination. So darn it. Well, hopefully now you guys will always know that secondary containment, you can't do environmental equivalence on that. I hope at least you'll take that away. Again, I'm Kim Churchill. I'm the Region 5 SPCC coordinator. Here's my contact information again. Here is Heather's contact information again. We really appreciate your guys' interest in SPCC, and we're always here to help with any questions you might have. And we actually even have with us today a very special guest, Mark Howard, who is the SPCC National Program Manager. And we're very thankful to have him here with us today to help answer, in the little time we have left, any questions you guys have.
Okay, Kim, can you hear me all right? You guys hear me? Kim, can you hear me all right? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Well, my fingers were on fire, so number one, I want to apologize for all the typos because, man, you guys were grilling me. We got quite a number. I think I answered all of them except for a couple. So let me go through them real quick. Kim, if you want to jump in, fine, or I can get them because most of these are kind of tricky, but I'm sure you can handle them. First one is, do transformers that are owned by utilities count towards your inventory for determining SPCC, if SPCC is required? Do you want me to get that, Kim, or do you want to get it?
So I'll take it, but the rest if you want to get, just because we're limited on time. Yep. But if the transformers are owned and operated by someone else, they do not need to be included in your facility storage capacity, but we do recommend that you include in your plan a discussion of who is going to address any kind of spill from those containers.
Great. Could you elaborate on the chemistry of produced water from dry gas that is not drawing condensate or crude oil? The preamble is very clear. That was a settlement negotiation. I can tell you because I wrote it, and the chemistry is not the issue. What it says in the preamble is it can be recovered. What we look for is I think they call it the black velvet of the wet gas systems. We don't look for a particular number. If the dry gas well is collecting oil and recycling it or selling it for resale or paying tax or revenue on that oil that they collect in a dry gas well, there's that much oil, we consider that a wet gas well. So it's not on chemistry as much as if there's enough oil there to be taxed or for it to be resold or the like, then we would regulate it. Normally, this is for facilities that would not be in Ohio. This is for like the Powder Basin, where there's little to no sheen, and mainly the sheen comes from the lubricant oils that are associated with the pump jack. Got two more, and I think we can wrap it up. Double wall tanks. In short, there's too much to go in here, but the question is, does a double wall tank require size containment or general overfill containment? In short, a double wall tank has containment for the tank dealt with. You have to inspect the interstices. The problem that we see is transfers in and out of the tank, and vent overfills normally aren't covered, and those need to be covered by general provision. In addition, double wall tanks either have to meet the double wall tank memo or provide some kind of active measure to address general containment sized spills associated with the vent and the overfill. So I would strongly recommend you go to our guidance and read the double wall tank memo and the section of the guidance on double wall tanks that explains your options in detail. So there's a lot of options is the bottom line, but yes, generally you're looking at some form of general secondary containment for the transfer areas and potential overflow areas. For the last one is a really good question. It's for Ohio Production. ODNR operates a Center for Spills and Releases that is supposed to report to national setters. Is that a status variant notification? I would strongly recommend, and this is not anything against Ohio, they're a great partner, but you have a federal requirement that has a federal requirement for you, the owner-operator facility, to call the Federal Reporting Center, the NRC, that's the Coast Guard, if you have met the requirements of harm, which is a sheen, emulsion, water quality standard. I've included them in the Q&As. Basically, if it meets the criteria under 40 CFR 110, the sheen rule that these folks from Region 5 went over earlier, you do need to report to the federal government. I would not rely solely on the state to address your reporting requirements as an owner-operator. They have no legal requirement. If they do, that's fantastic. Again, it's your requirement, not the state's. Outside of that, I think that's most of the questions that I didn't answer. There's a bunch of other ones that I did. Just want to see if anything else came in. There's a weird one about pipe assembly on top of loading rail cars. It's getting rack. All these rack things, you can send Kim and Heather and I pictures and we can take a look at it. I'm not going to make a site-specific determination based on text and a thing. It's just not enough information. What was the qualifying above ground? Yes, it's 1320 is our above ground threshold. And what's the frequency of inspections? Frequency of inspections are dictated by the standard. Is oil, I think there's one more here and then we're done. Is oil spilled over icy water body? Oil spilled to navigable waters or adjoining shorelines in accordance with 110 are reportable. That takes care of all the questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Kim, Heather, and Mark. Great presentation today. We really appreciate you being here with us. Upcoming webinars, we have one more in October, the October 21st next week, NPDES permitting new and proposed rules and policies. Learn about new and proposed rules, policies in process, and upcoming regulations that could impact your non-stormwater NPDES permit. Then November 3rd, we have a kickoff for our Recycling Ohio grant. We'll talk about Ohio EPA's 2022 Recycling Litter Prevention Grant application process, funding opportunities, and eligible project activities targeted by the grant program. And on November 9th, we have Feet on the Street, Fighting Contamination Across Ohio. Join the Recycling Partnership for an overview of how 6 Ohio communities reduce their contamination rates by implementing Feet on the Street, the partnership's signature tagging program. If you missed past webinars or would like to register for these and other upcoming webinars, please check out our training tab at epa.ohio.gov/DEFA. You can also click on our training tab to receive you can also go to our training tab to subscribe and receive electronic notices for upcoming training. With that, I'm going to end today's webinar. Again, thank you for joining us and have a great day.